Anyway, here we are again. Thanks for joining us, Dan Griffin and Paul Morello, and obviously Kenneth as normal. So, guys, null and void, that's the topic today. Obviously, the GFA have already announced their decision. What do we think? Any starters?
I think personally wasn't massively in favour of null and void. It was definitely not my preferred decision. I would like, obviously, we couldn't complete the season. The government said as much and they unlocked the rock. So that's fair enough. We couldn't complete the season. Maybe would like some sort of points per game measurement, obviously unweighted because there's no home and away advantage. But obviously they've gone for null and void, and I think we kind of have to accept that.
But have they gone null and void? Because if they've gone null and void, surely Lincoln would have been in the Champions League, because that means that it's a total cancel and you defer back to the season before.
There was some rationale, some guidance given by UEFA on that front in terms of the teams qualifying for Europe, and basically due to the fact they referred to the regulations and the fact the Gib Telecom Cup wasn't going to be able to be completed. They said the third place team, which in our case would have been Lincoln, would fill in that last spot for Europe. So that was the criteria in terms of setting out what team goes into Champions League or Europa League.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with it. It's well within the spirit of the game, and I think it's only fair and right that Europa went into the Champions League. So I have no qualms with that. Maybe if we look at the other leagues, Cyprus null and voided. They've deferred completely. So
I think it was same points. I think it was.
Yeah. But basically, the other 18 teams that went to a vote, and the other 18 teams voted to null and void. So, and they were the only two that wanted to carry on. So,
yeah, but Cyprus. I mean, it's the closest we can compare to Gib, really, in terms of size, because I've read some of the complaints emanating, obviously, from Europa, who feel undone by allegedly on sporting reasons, which, come on, let's not kid ourselves. There's no sporting reason. The rationale for the complaint is that they've missed out on 260,000 euros. Simple. And that's it. The closest we can get is to Cyprus. And really, it wasn't a vote. I mean, the clubs wanted to continue. And I would imagine that here on the local level too, clubs would have wanted to continue, but the Cyprus government imposed certain conditions. And if you look at UEFA's
that was the same as Gib, really. It was imposed by the government, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, if you look at UEFA's guidelines, which I've got them from here, and I'll quote, they provided two reasons for the legitimate cancellation of a season, right? And firstly was the existence of an official order prohibiting sports events, so that the domestic competitions cannot be completed before dates that would make it possible to complete the current season in good time before the next season to start.
Yeah.
And secondly, insurmountable economic problems which make finishing the season impossible, because it would put at risk the long-term financial stability of the domestic competition and or clubs. And if you look at these two main reasons from UEFA, Gibraltar, the GFA didn't have any other any other avenue. We meet both, and the swiftness of the decision after announcing the actual because first we got an announcement that it was not continuing, and within 48 hours we got an announcement that it was being null and voided. So in my opinion, and looking at the facts from the outside, obviously as we're debating here because we don't have access to any information, it would not be difficult for them to prove that they have abided both stances from UEFA. I mean, I'm hearing rumors Europa are going to be taking legal action against the GFA and all the rest. I think it's a waste of time, personally, and money. They must have unlimited reserves if they're doing so. If you look already at France, some of the clubs have taken legal action, and they've been dismissed already. On the French court said, look, we don't have competence for this, whether they'll be going to CAS or another resolute chamber. I mean, I don't think the courts in Gibraltar are competence to investigate and to look into a possible complaint from Europa, because again, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The nature of the complaint is not that it would be only the third league in 70 odd years. For starters, this current Europa team is not 70 odd years. They've been 7 years, because they took a break of 65 years in competing, and the nature of their complaint is 260,000 euros. Man, if I were me, I mean, I would take a different stance. I would take the complaint and throw it back at Europe and said, okay, we'll nominate you, seeing that it's because sportingly you've only won 3 leagues in this time. We'll nominate you champions, but you have to share the prize money with all the clubs. Let's see.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I was looking into the Northern Ireland League, and all of the top teams have said that they've suspended the league, but if they do null and void the league, they've agreed to share the money.
I think to Kenneth's point as well, I think either decision, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if you give the championship, say, to a club who's first, then the second team, if they are, say in this case it was 5 points behind, they're going to be aggrieved at the fact that we still have 4 games to go. Doesn't matter what records you've held out throughout the rest of the year, we still have a chance. So it opens up another sort of debate from another.
We've opened up Pandora's box. It's hard to put it back, back in there now.
Look, another thing is that Europa would have had an unassailable lead. Then they would totally be in the rights, and they would have had to have been named champions, or even on 11 points, because I think Paul, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 4 games that were left?
It was 4 games left, and the next game was meant to be Europa St. Joseph's.
But they had to play second, third, and fourth.
Yep.
It was. I mean, it wasn't an unassailable lead, and it wasn't. It could have twisted and turned on its head on that game.
Definitely.
So I think that, look, the GFA took the correct decision. It's the only one that, because you do a points weighted decision, it's not fair, really. It was too crucial, that game. And
you would make a decision for or against one club or the other, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Who are the games, Dan? Lincoln, St. Joseph's,
Lynx and Lions. Oh, no, sorry, Magpies, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, UEFA the whole way through their stance with recommendations and guidelines were they wanted domestic competitions to finish, and they gave a deadline to the member associations that were ranked 16 to 55, deadline for the 25th of May to reply with a sort of restart fixture schedule where the associations were able to compete the domestic competitions by the 20th of July, which, as Dan pointed out, after government, GFA went and talked to the government. Government said it's impossible that you're going to be able to complete any competitions by the 20th. So stemming from that, then it was up to the GFA board of directors, the governance and strategy board, along with the president of the GFA, and they convened. They thought it was the right decision to be null and void, and they came to us after they had their meeting, and they asked us for our opinion as a GFLA, what we thought on how to finish the season, and we didn't have any disagreement with what they said, to be fair, for the reasons I explained earlier. I think the close proximity of the teams, it just wouldn't sit right to call someone a champion when there's still games to go and there's still a chance that someone else can catch up. So,
I mean, the other point to make is that the financial implications to the clubs would have been enormous if they'd have suspended the league and left it another 2 months, because you would have had all that ambiguity with contracts and who's out of contract, who's not out of contract. Some teams might not even be able to field the same squad that they had when all this arose in March. You could have players leaving to go to teams in Spain, and you could have been left with a team that couldn't compete.
Yeah, that's another point with this with Spain as well. A lot of players that play in the Liga come up from across the border as well. So their lockdown situation in Spain also had an impact here in Gib as well.
Of
So
course.
we want to
No, absolutely.
So, sorry,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
it's not just. No. I'm agreeing with you, Paul. It's not just the fact that they come from there. A majority of our training facilities are in Spain. How do we get full squads across the border to train? We do not have the infrastructure, the logistic to follow the protocols, because I've read also in some of the social media that some of people close to Europa, agents of the manager, they're using, first of all, they're lying, because the agent of the manager stated that the Cyprus League has cancelled it and named one team champion, which is not correct. It is a null and void situation. Yeah. But the protocol, the government of Cyprus, the protocol, I spoke to a friend of mine who's in UEFA and FIFA boards and is shipwrecked himself. They had a very thorough protocol in place. I mean, we don't know, I don't know, Paul, perhaps you know through your role, did the GFA have a protocol to return? A health and safety protocol to return?
This is, I was going to raise the next point, though. It wasn't just the GFA that raised that point. Clubs also, their own medical staff. There was a concern of wonder how long do players are able to train before they can go into match mode, because you can have injuries, you can get career-threatening injuries just from the mere fact that you're not in training and suddenly you're into game mode. So that was another concern. There was variations between how long some medical staff thought it'd be enough to be training before going back into game mode. Some said 15 days. I think that someone else said there was a bit more. So it would all be dependent on medical staff who are then liable to their own members in the team as well. So there was this, and also the medical costs to get people back into.
Absolutely. I mean, testing has been crucial here. Why has Germany started before any other league? Why is England? I mean, in England, that's in La Liga, they're testing players 3 times a week. In Germany, they've been testing them before they started something like 5 times a week. And in England, they're doing it also 4 or 5 times a week. How much does that cost?
Exactly.
Yeah, but we can't compare against.
We do not have the financial infrastructure locally for it.
Well, it's not even that. You can't have the players training and isolated for 2 weeks just training, because most of them are working.
And not only that, also in Gib as well.
What are they going to do? Get a hotel somewhere and isolate together? It's just impractical. There's no way that can happen.
That's what the Germans did. The German first and second division, a week before they kicked off 2 weeks ago, everybody was confined to a hotel which had been cleaned up by independent government and German league authorities. They cleaned everything up. Portugal, which starts next weekend, the same. They've got 6 neutral venues, because the infrastructure at some stadiums is not at the same level of the bigger teams. So look, again, Europa have had an outstanding season. Nobody's doubting it. But unfortunately, for me, the GFA's hands were tied, whichever way you look at it, and the correct decision was taken.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's one thing that maybe we could talk about, which whether it makes the cut or not, I don't know. The fact is that if St. Joseph's had have beaten Europa, their record would have been 1-1, draw 1, lost 1, the same as Europa. Although Europa were undefeated, let's be honest, nobody outside of the top 3 have dropped any points to anybody outside of the top 3, apart from the draw with St. Joseph's and Lynx. So we can look at it all ways we want. We know that those 2 games were very important. I know that Europa feel aggrieved, and I understand that they feel aggrieved. But
nobody's disputing that.
But I would imagine that if they'd have gone to the clubs and said, look, we'll split the money, the same as the Northern Ireland leagues have said in practice to do, in principle to do,
Yeah, in terms of the money as well, that could have been the case. But in terms of money as well, right now as it stands, from the position that we're in, UEFA haven't given any.
I mean, the other thing as well is if it's a null and void season, will UEFA give that money?
Well, I just wanted to finish off that UEFA haven't given any information yet on how much monies are going to be sent over to the GFA. But you raised a good point before as well.
I mean, that money, I mean, to be honest, from 2013, I think it should have been shared every year so that we might have been a little bit weaker in Europe as we started in 2013 because obviously they wouldn't have had the financial clout, but we wouldn't have given the financial clout to just 3 clubs. It would be a nice opportunity to try and reset the clock and allow all the teams some form of opportunity to be able to better themselves. Are the teams in negotiation for that for the future, or is that off the table?
No, I obviously can't say much, but there is progress being made. There is progress being made, but again,
it's in negotiation.
Yeah, limited to what I can.
Yeah, but it goes back to the same thing. Look, I don't belong to any of the groups, but it's the usual suspects who are against prize sharing. I've been saying it before. A ball was actually kicked under UEFA football. It is crucial for the future of the game in Gibraltar that there is a prize sharing formula. There's always been resistance from the teams competing in Europe. I believe this pandemic will or has helped some clubs changing their way forward. I mean, one of the clubs I was told of the record that is against this prize sharing is Monscalpe, which I find a disgrace because they don't even pay their players. There are claims of more than 50,000 euros at the GFA. So if I were in a position of authority within the GFA, I wouldn't even take into account their votes and would consider 11 votes to push it through. But it's crucial, and everybody needs to be in favor because eventually the league, I mean, look, it's very easy for St. Joseph's and Europa to say, oh no, I'm not prize sharing because they're in a position of strength right now. But St. Joseph mustn't forget that after I think it was the second season, they had to play off so as not to be relegated. I mean, this can turn on its head very, very easily. For the future of Gibraltar, it needs to be in place.
I think we're in just adding to Ken, I think we're in a unique position to be able to do that here in Gib. The word unique gets said quite a lot in Gib, and we don't sometimes make the most of it. But like I said, without the bottom teams or the teams that form part of a league, the top 3 won't get the joys they get from getting into Europe. And like Kenneth completely said, things turn in football from day to day or season to season. It's better said. So yeah, I completely agree on that front.
Well, not only that, a lot of our young talent starts off in those teams.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you look at the likes of Lions, especially, who are producing young players left, right and centre. Chances are those are going to filter through to the top 3 or even top 4 in the next year or two. And Lions will get probably no compensation for it, next to nothing.
Yeah.
For the work that they put in probably from the under 6, under 7 years throughout to one of the big teams taking them because they've offered an extra £100 a month or something like that.
But that's another reason. That's another reason for sharing the money. A team like Lions, even if they're not going to be compensated for feeding the big teams with the national players, they at least deserve some revenue for the amount of work they put in.
Definitely, I think there should be some sort of prize sharing.
Are they? Let's be honest.
I think there should be prize sharing, definitely, although I think there should be some weighting in favour of teams who have a youth set up in place. So like you were saying, the likes of Monscalpe, who don't really have a youth set up, probably should get a lower percentage of that, as they're not doing a lot to develop local football, whereas someone like Lions, who are doing a lot to develop local football, probably deserve more from the prize pool.
At higher end, yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
The historical teams who have developed players.
Manchester, Glasses.
62, Glasses, Lincoln, Lions, even the likes of College, Jago, how many kids Jago gone through his hands? Not right now, no, but that has to be rewarded because what message are you sending out? I mean, Paul mentioned we're in a unique position. Yes, we are. The Netherlands shares its prize money for the past 3 years. So if they can do it, why can't we? Okay, obviously the one that wins the league has to take the biggest share. Absolutely. But we cannot have the teams at the top risking the future of local football. I mean, I am seriously concerned about the future of local football.
Well, I mean, ultimately it's Team Gibraltar, isn't it? Yeah, it's great to see teams doing well and progressing in Europe, but ultimately the goal is to just keep the amount of players getting through the league and into the national team.
I read Monscalpe's statement complaining about the decision of the GFA. I mean, how can you have, I can understand Europa complaining, but Monscalpe, how can you have the audacity to complain about an Null Void when you, for the last 3 seasons, the strategy has been to bring in 20 players, they get rid of them in January because they leave because you're not paying them. They bring in another 20 players that's been the strategy over the past 3 years. That gives Gibraltar a bad name. That has to be stopped.
I can't remember. Who were they playing in the semi-final? I can't remember. Europa. So
they would have lost, realistically. They would have lost 5 or 6.
Their main grievance really is they put their hand up as a grievance because they were still they wouldn't have even mentioned, they wouldn't even be in our conversation if they weren't in the semi-final of the Rock Cup, would they?
Exactly.
Let's be honest. But
they wouldn't have been.
They'd be playing a team that would be going for 3 consecutive Rock Cup finals. The team that are undefeated in the league, and they would have to face either the second or the third team in the league in the final.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
and then they would have had to pass UEFA licensing regulations just to get into Europe, which would be a bit doubtful.
No chance.
Yeah. So I mean, it probably would have been better to be a little bit more diplomatic with their reply. But
exactly. I mean, that's why I said, look, it happened. Keep your mouth shut. But they came out with an official press release on the webpage.
And the timing of it couldn't have been any worse. It was hours after the government's document came out saying that no sports could be played in August.
Yeah.
It completely went against the official government advice about 2 hours afterwards. The timing was horrendous.
And just adding to that as well, I mean, in Gib as well, the last thing from the football perspective, football scene that we wanted to do was take away any sort of medical facilities that may be needed down the line. Maybe not yet, but we don't know how this is going to turn. It's a volatile situation. So the last thing football wanted to do was to be seen as taking away any resources, if at all possible. As Kenneth said, the cost would be probably ridiculous to fund, and would it be worthwhile as well? That's the other question you have to really ask. And the fact that there's no promotion or relegation, it does sort of ease. It doesn't help, but it does ease off certain.
Yeah, that was quite helpful having just one division.
Exactly.
Well, you look at futsal, where you got 2 divisions. I don't know if any decisions have been made yet on futsal, but obviously you got promotion relegation there that could be an issue. Whereas football hasn't.
They've null and voided.
Yes, we asked Hercules about a week ago, and who were top of the 2nd division, and they hadn't heard anything yet. But obviously, it doesn't look likely they're going to go up. Yeah. That's an issue that luckily the football hasn't had to deal with, as there's only 1 division, so there's no relegation.
The second reason, unsurmountable economic problems which make finishing the season impossible, because it will put at risk the long-term financial stability of the domestic competition and or clubs. That's it.
I think so. I think now the plan is obviously move on to whenever next season can safely start. Try and plan for that, and then obviously the qualifiers for Lincoln, Europa, and St Joseph's.
I don't see those going ahead. I
think that's going to be a problem as well. As teams,
there's going to be a problem.
Teams will be going to those games having not played a competitive match potentially in 5 or 6 months. It's going to be very hard.
They might need to get a private jet to go there.
Exactly. If they're not playing,
£40,000 to £80,000.
Yeah.
Just to get there, and then you're going to have to test before you get there, 2 weeks prior, when you get there, so that you can, and then isolate in the hotel that you were in. I mean,
yeah. I think UEFA got a lot of work with regards to qualifiers for both tournaments.
The initial UEFA standpoint, as far as I'm aware, up to this date, was their idea was to have the remaining Champions League matches and Europa League matches run concurrently with the prelim rounds for next in August. That's what their stance was, which is why they tried to hurry up with the deadline and all of that for us in particular. So yeah, that was a bit more from their angle. That's what their idea has been anyway from UEFA's standpoint. So yeah, we're still waiting to see if Champions League football does come back. That's all now, like you guys said, or Europa League.
So anyway, time will tell on that one.
Yep.
Okay,
Well,
gents.
Take care. Thank you very much for the time. All of you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, likewise. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys.